So we conclude this week's episode of ReZero Season 2 with a kiss of death from Amelia. This is probably my personal favorite episode of the entirety of ReZero from the very first episode of Season 1. This episode is suffering with another helping of suffering. That's exactly what this is. And when you look at that final sequence of this episode with Amelia and Subaru, and you see Subaru state, it's kind of like The Offer, and everyone else that worked on the animators, everything that worked on this episode was just like, hey guys, look, Subaru finally got everything he wanted. He finally has the person that he wants to love him, actually focusing her entire being on him, falling head over heels for him, saying, I love you, here, have a lap pillow, hey, I want you to only focus on me, etc. When you have all of this, dialogue from Amelia, it's kind of like ironic, really, because this is what Subaru kind of wants, but when he finally gets it, it's obvious that he doesn't want it like this. He's like, not like this. You know, if we were to hear Subaru's inner thoughts, you'd be thinking, not like this. There's just no way I want something like this. And what's even sadder about all of this is that when you look at that final moment with Amelia going in for a kiss on Subaru's, bitten body, his body is in such awful shape, that is technically Subaru's first kiss. She kissed Subaru right before his lights went out, and obviously a new loop is going to begin. You gotta imagine from his perspective, that's traumatizing to a certain extent. Imagine someone you love acting like that and then kissing you like that. She's not even acknowledging anything. She's not even acknowledging the wounds that are on Subaru. She just is like, hey, I love you, and all that. Stay with me, I'm happy you're here, I knew you'd return. Just everything about that is just so eerie, creepy, and disturbing, because just seeing Amelia like that is just so unsettling. It's not something I think anyone was ready for going into this episode. Even me, knowing what to expect because of, I've read the web novel, even I, watching this episode, was not prepped to just see the current state of Amelia, and the voice actor, gotta say, did a fantastic job. If there is anything that really does need credit right now from this episode, which everything's really good, but the voice acting really did nail it, to Subaru's cry and desperate helps, to, Garfield, how he was trying to save Ram, to Rosewall's voice acting, to Amelia's voice acting, Beatrice's voice acting, Elsa's voice acting, just everything about this episode when it comes to the voice acting really was just grade A quality. Honestly, it went above and beyond to really give so much life to these characters, and Amelia's voice actor, holy crap, she went in. She legitimately went in hard on just that scene with her saying, Daisuke, I love you, Subaru. Just holy crap. But okay, so, where to begin? There is a lot to really just think about when it comes to this episode. More so, honestly, than previous episodes. The previous episodes, there was a lot of world building. And this episode did have some world building as well. But what this episode tackles is something fundamentally very different. It tackles more of characterization, some of the motives of said characters, and who is really controlling things behind the scenes. That's what this episode tries to do. And it really shows what Subaru currently has to deal with and just how backed up into a corner he currently is. His circumstances are so awful that it's just how is he supposed to be able to overcome what he's currently facing? Let's think about this, okay? Let's just go over the entire list right now, okay? From start to finish. So he has to deal with everything going on at the mansion, with, Meili and Elsa attacking, Petra, attacking Rim, attacking, Frederica, attacking Beatrice, and, that's an entire ordeal in of itself. That's a major ordeal, because Elsa is no joke. The only person that was really able to put a stop to Elsa in the beginning of Season 1 was Reinhardt, and obviously, Reinhardt's nowhere to be around. He's not going to obviously pop up right now and be able to save the day. So when you just look at everything, it's just Subaru doesn't have that option anymore. So he has to deal with it somehow. He has to deal with Elsa and Meili and get them out of there or defeat them. And obviously what we saw from Beatrice when she shattered Elsa somehow miraculously came back. It just leaves a big question mark. You're how did she do that? And as you can see, that's just one issue out of just a whole buttload of things going on now in this arc. Now we move over to the stuff with Beatrice. Beatrice's entire character is also something that is very important too. She is very isolated. She's been isolated for over 400 years, and she's been waiting for this person to walk through that door and say, hey, you know, I will fulfill your contract. I will either end you, or I will focus entirely on you. My entire being will just be focused on you. You will be the person, my first, basically, the one that is my utmost priority to focus on. And obviously, this is not something Subaru can actually give to Beatrice. So it makes this situation even more complicated than it already is. So that's even more complicated stuff going on at the mansion. Then we have the stuff going on with whatever connections going with the Gospels with Beatrice, Ekidana, and, you know, Rosewall, and how she has no Gospel that's not telling her any messages, but we don't know what's really going on in Rosewall, so we can assume he's potentially seeing the future. So that's a big mystery too. We don't know what's going on with that. Then we progress even further. We have the stuff in Sanctuary. We have the stuff with now Rosewall basically being kind of evil. We don't really get a good depiction on where he actually stands. When you see Rosewall in this episode, we get an understanding of his thought process, how crazy he is, what he will do to achieve whatever his dream is, but we don't necessarily know. You can't really say he is evil, you can't really say he's good. He's on his side. And he's kind of like this neutral entity that obviously is causing problems, but isn't full out evil, because, I mean, he did technically say, Subaru, you could just reset all of this and we could do it again and get it right next time. And that is a very big deal. So Rosewall is another obstacle on top of everything else just from the mansion. Then you have the stuff with Garfield. Garfield is this one that is very untrusting. He's constantly not trusting Subaru. He's changing every single loop. You don't know if he's going to be Subaru's ally or he's going to be Subaru's enemy, and he's constantly really, you know, distrusting of anything Subaru does. He does not trust Subaru whatsoever, and so in any given moment, he could just lock Subaru up and throw him into a jail cell, and then that entire loop is ruined. So we got stuff like that going on. Then we have the stuff going on with, you know, the trial in general, and how the trial needs to be completed just for anyone in Sanctuary that is a half-blood to be able to leave Sanctuary. So we have it to where Amelia has to pass the trial, because Garfield only wants Amelia to be able to do it, and that is what's set in stone. If Subaru tries to go around and do that, he's kind of walking on Amelia and saying he doesn't believe in her and trust in her, which would obviously make her mental state that we got to see in this episode even worse than it already is, which is, like, crazy to think about. So that's another issue. Then you have the Great Rabbit, which is coming to Sanctuary thanks to Rosewall and whatever he is seeing in his book, you know, creating a snowstorm. So he has the Great Rabbit coming over and, you know, wrecking the entirety of Sanctuary. So he's even more pressed for time. So he's not just dealing with Elsa and Amelia at the mansion and, you know, Beatrice and all that. He's dealing with the trials, Amelia's mental state. He's dealing with Rosewall, whatever's going on with him. He's dealing with the Great Rabbit, getting the people out of Sanctuary, dealing with Garfield. You can see that he has just so much that is going on. He honestly has never been this pressed up against a wall, because it's like the author is saying to the audience and Subaru right now, like, you can't be in two places at once. That's exactly what's going on here. It's like, Subaru, you may have the gift of return by death, the ability to reset and do things over and over, but regardless of how many times you reset, there is just no way you're going to be in two places at once. It's not happening. You're not going to be able to be at the mansion, and you're not going to be able to be at Sanctuary at the same time. So it's kind of like the author is presenting something before Subaru's like, you have to make an option, a choice. Who do you sacrifice? Do you sacrifice the mansion? Or do you sacrifice Sanctuary? And obviously, in Subaru's mind, none is an option. He doesn't want to sacrifice either. That was the whole determination he made when he had last talked with Ekidana. He wants to go through infinite loops if he has to, use his gift, that is return by death, to be able to save everyone. But when you just look at the circumstances of everything going on, can Subaru really do this? Because he's just one man. Even if he has return by death and all that, he is just one man. There's just only so much you can do with the little time he actually has. And so let's actually talk about the time frame, okay? So we do know, thanks to previous episodes, that Elsa and Maylee will attack the mansion earlier if Subaru arrives and messes with whatever plan's been presented. So, for instance, if Subaru instantly arrives in less than a day back to, the mansion, Elsa will initiate her attack probably in a few hours. So, if Subaru tries to get in the, ahead of Elsa, she will even chase them down, because Melee chased down Petra and Frederica to get rid of them at the village. So, it kind of puts in perspective that running is really not an option as well from the mansion, and Subaru getting there early is not going to help anything. So, Elsa is on a set time. She will wait probably a few days before she really initiates her attack, but if Subaru's too late, they will die. But if Subaru's too early, then she will also attack. So Subaru needs to somehow figure out a time frame of when he can actually go in. Now let's shift over to Sanctuary and its current time frame. Subaru makes a quick analysis when he sees the snow in Sanctuary and all that. It's like, and the rabbits, it's only been 2 days. He talks about how it hasn't really been that long whatsoever, basically letting us know that this loop is very different once again. The snowstorm is a lot earlier. You have where the rabbit has arrived a lot earlier. It has been multiple upon multiple days, 3 plus 4 days now. It's a lot earlier just in 2 days. So whatever Subaru did caused the events of what happened in Sanctuary to progress a lot faster. So he's obviously on a timeline on both sides. Like, for instance, he can speed up the events on both sections a lot quicker, but also delay them depending on his options, his choices. So that is a very key detail that this episode wanted to point out. Now let's go one step further. We also get indication now that the reason why Amelia wasn't really present in the previous loops is because she was locking herself up inside of the temple, the grave of Ekidana and all of that. You have Amelia literally insane. And so that explains where she was at when Subaru was looking around throughout the village and he couldn't find anything, he couldn't find Amelia, is because she was probably inside of there just waiting for Subaru to return. So she potentially starved to death, most likely, in that loop in the previous episodes, and the rabbit wasn't actually the one to finish her. But it still doesn't change the fact that we now have confirmation it isn't Amelia that is causing the snowstorm. It isn't Puck as well, even though this entire loop or this sequence of events makes you believe that's what's going on, thanks to what we saw from Season 1, which is very interesting how the writer did that, because it goes along with what Rosewall did and how he's manipulating Amelia's situation and trying to isolate her and make her feel like she is hated, nobody wants her, nobody loves her, she's a witch, she's awful, she's evil. He did everything in his power to really isolate her and shove her into a corner, just like how Subaru is kind of shoved into a corner right now. And when you see this, obviously everybody's going to blame Amelia. They're instantly going to shift their gazes to Amelia, that she is the one that is causing everything going on, and then the reason why the great rabbits pop up, etc. The problems are definitely insane. They're very, very, very large, and not something that Subaru is going to be able to just instantly go in and finish. There's just so much he has to tackle, and honestly, would you blame him if he doesn't really know where to begin? Because, where do you begin with this whole mess? There's just so much going on. What would you actually do if you were in Subaru's shoes? So, let's actually talk about the beginning sequence. Let's talk about Beatrice, because that's where the episode started. So we get some much needed clarification to Beatrice's entire character. Who she is, what she is, and what she's been living for. And we kind of find out that Beatrice has been contracted to basically sit in the library for over 400 years, waiting for that person, that someone to walk through that door, take her out of there, and either end her or potentially focus their entire entity on her to allow her to actually have something, to be able to feel whole once again. And this is a very complicated issue, because you get to see that Beatrice has waited for so long, she's had so much time to think, that she realizes that most likely the reason why the book is so empty is because the book is like, you have no future. You have nothing that will happen. You are someone that is blank. You will die. That is your conclusion. You will die here. This will be the ending of your story. But obviously there's different messages to this. The blank book also might mean a new beginning, that the future is blank, which means you can decide your own choices. There's many ways to kind of interpret it, but because Beatrice has been alone for so long, though, her opinion on everything has been very distorted, and it's very clear that it's going to take a lot to really help out Beatrice, to be able to get her to overcome what she's currently going through. And Subaru obviously can't give Beatrice exactly what she wants, because when you think about it, Subaru doesn't just want to focus on Beatrice. He has so much he has to care about. So many people he cares about. He has Rim. He has Amelia. He has even Rosewall. He has Ram. He has Otto. He has, now Beatrice. There's so many people he cares about. He can't just focus his entire being on one person. If he does, it will cause it to where his overall perspective of everything will shift, and he would have, people as a lower priority, and he might be even willing to sacrifice them to save the number one priority, maybe, let's say, Beatrice, if he actually became, that person. So that is a big ordeal for him to overcome. Beatrice is as, empty as her book. The book's pages, that is how empty Beatrice is right now, and she needs someone to be able to give her life, give her happiness in her life. And can Subaru actually be that person, or is there someone else for her? That is the question that this episode raised. And it's honestly upsetting, because now now why Beatrice got so upset when Subaru's like, could you get rid of me? Could you end me in the previous loops? And why, in season 1, she got really upset when Subaru wanted to die and he jumped off and all that. It makes a lot of sense now why she got so upset and she didn't want that to happen, is because that's what Beatrice has always wanted. She wanted that, but if she can't have that, she didn't want to be the one to give a release to someone else. It's kind of like, she's like, why must I do it for someone else, but someone can't do this for me? Why can't you get rid of me, but I have to do this for other people? And you can just see the conflict now with Beatrice's character ever since season 1 that's been presented. But it goes much further than that. We now know why, Beatrice has been like she is, why she says, I suppose, or some of her actions, why she acts like she does. She doesn't get any messages from the book. She desperately checks the book probably for something new to pop up, but nothing ever does. And so she has technically been acting with accordance with her own will. She may be holding this book and maybe following the will of the book technically because she's waiting for something to pop up, and she's locking herself up in the library, but it doesn't change the fact, though, that Beatrice, every action she's done since the very beginning has technically been of her own choosing. So it's very clear Beatrice isn't necessarily following the book, but she is trapped because of the book. She is waiting for the book to do something, and she will not make important critical decisions because she is waiting for something, or waiting for that person to finally make that decision for her. So it's an incredible episode just to give a lot of context to Beatrice's character and what she's been going through since the very beginning, and that what Subaru's going to have to do for her is not something relatively easy, and especially that death scene as well with her when she's dying and all that, and she finally gets her release, and she puts her hand out and she actually teleports Subaru. This also shows the link between, Beatrice and Sanctuary, because she teleports Subaru literally to Sanctuary with the crystal that Subaru has, and he went into the prison cell that Garfield actually had him in the previous loops. So we now know that Beatrice is technically capable of teleportation, teleporting someone to Sanctuary through the crystal. Something like that could potentially be used to be able to overcome this current situation. But it doesn't change the fact, though, that Beatrice, even in the end, she didn't want Subaru to die. She did protect him and saved him and, shuttled him off somewhere else where she couldn't actually see it. So it's incredibly powerful, very sad, and you just gotta imagine from Subaru's perspective, he's like, what do I do about this? But then right after that, when he's teleported, he tries to find Amelia, he sees that she's in a very broken state, and it gets everything so much worse, because now we get to see Amelia's creepy side, and you gotta imagine from Subaru's perspective, when he saw Amelia, he was probably imagining maybe it might be Satala. Because of what happened in the previous with the Witch of Envy, he might have assumed whatever was going on with Amelia, Satala was taking control of her. But it was very clear that that was definitely not the case, because Amelia was just crazy. She was just so broken in that moment. She was her own person, and the reason why this actually happened, and why she was so broken, is because of Rosewall. Rosewall, he created the snow to be able to make Amelia remember her village, where she came from, her origin, which is why I said to watch The Frozen Bond. If you remember, I said it a few episode reviews ago, that if you have yet to actually watch The Frozen Bond, I really cannot recommend it enough to you. You should watch it. You especially need to watch it now to truly understand what Rosewall is doing to Amelia, why Amelia is in such a crazy state right now, and why the snow matters so much is because it's literally reminding Amelia of everything that happened in her past before she met Puck. The snow is reminiscent to the village and how she, has every villager in that village that's completely frozen solid. And then obviously everybody is mistrusting of Amelia. They think Amelia is a witch. And so because of that, when they see snow, when they see Amelia, they're thinking, oh no, it's a witch. She's doing this. She's causing this. And even though Amelia isn't, she doesn't really know how to properly explain herself to make it seem like it's not her. And obviously the villagers are not going to explain because they know snow does come from Amelia, or at least Puck in general, so they're like, we can't trust her, she is a witch. So she gets even more isolated. The village no longer is depending on her, it's no longer counting on her, they don't like her anymore, they think she's evil, so she goes into, you know, the trials, and she also thinks that Subaru's no longer around. So Subaru obviously hates her and left her and all that because she is a witch. She has this anger and anxiety within herself that she's like, once again, people are leaving me because I am a witch. I am evil. They think I am evil. And so she desperately goes to the trials to try to prove that she isn't, and maybe it might have Subaru return if she's able to succeed. So she continues to press herself up against these trials that Ekidana is doing for her, you know, Amelia to face the past. And obviously it continues to break down Amelia's mental state, and she doesn't have Puck to rely on. Subaru wasn't there to really help her out, so it resulted in her continuously progressing and regressing as a person until she literally was just completely broken. So it shows that Subaru also needs to be there. Someone needs to be there to be able to help out Amelia, and Puck not being there has really been a major detriment to everything. It's like Puck not being there has caused this too, because like Amelia's always been reliant on Puck, and now that Puck isn't there, Subaru has to be that person. But he can't just be that person either, because he has to deal with the stuff at the mansion. He has to deal with Garfield, he has to deal with the trials, he has to deal with everything going on. He can't just fully focus his attention on Amelia. That is something very clear that this episode wanted to point out, is that you have multiple characters wanting Subaru to just focus on one person, like Amelia wanted, you know, Subaru maybe to only focus on her, and Beatrice as well said that, but obviously he cannot do that. That is not something he actually can do. So you can see the complicated matter here, and how Amelia's mental state has been caused by Rosewall, how he's trapped her and isolated her, and he's just making this happen every single loop. But to go one step further, now we need to look at the situation with Rosewall. Rosewall, and his sudden kill of Ram and Garfield is incredibly scary, because it's like not something anyone probably ever expected. I mean, when you think about Ram and Rosewall's relationship, it always seemed like they were very close. Ram is obviously in love with Rosewall, and when you see Rosewall just go in and kill Ram to be able to get rid of Garfield, it's like, holy crap, like, what? And he does it so mercilessly. He like smiles the entire time he does it, which is just like, holy crap. And to go one step further as well, he just like shows his strength. Like, he may be a mage, he may be able to cause, you know, a snowstorm, but he actually is also someone that is capable of strong physical combat. I mean, he literally took off Garfield's head and took it completely, like, cleanly off. Like, that's insane. Like, everything we've seen for Garfield, he's incredibly powerful. He's physically strong. He may not be Satla, the Witch of Envy level, but Garfield is very strong. And to see someone like Rosewall that's actually kind of like a mage come in and just, like, kick his head straight off, it's just like, holy crap. And impel straight through two people like, you know, Ram and also Garfield says enough about him, too, and his fighting power, his strength as a person. Then, we also have the stuff going on with just the gospel, and how can we really view Rosewall now? And so, let's actually get into that. So now, with Rosewall's gospel, this is the interesting part about it, because we didn't actually get to see his pages. We didn't get to see actually what was inside of the book. We don't know if there's actually words or not, but it's very clear if we look at the contrast between Beatrice and look at Rosewall. Rosewall most likely does have some form of wording in his book. He was completely aware of, Subaru's return by death. It's been obvious for a few episodes now, but it's even more clear now that he finally talked to Subaru about a start over, like redo and all that, and he's like, you know, you could do it, just start all over, redo all of this, and so he knows things that obviously he should not know. So he probably does have words in the book that is telling some fragments of the future, and most likely that book is also telling him to cause the snowstorm, so it makes it to where the Great Rabbit will come, because if, you know, Rosewall starts the snowstorm, it will cause the Great Rabbit to appear. So, Subaru's kind of trapped right now. Rosewall is following the book, and most likely all of his actions are to achieve his great desire, what he actually wants. But that's the thing, we don't really know what Rosewall actually wants. That is something we really do not know at this point. We could take, you know, educated guesses and all that, but we really don't know what his dream really is, why he wants Subaru to redo and do things properly next time. We don't know exactly why that is. We just know that Rosewall is definitely going for something, and we can't really say he's fully evil or good. But the thing, though, is that he does basically say, Subaru, you can use redo and start over, but I cannot. And this kind of shows the mental state of Rosewall, and I think this is going to catch everybody off guard. And it really brings up a really good question about, or a good thing about everything that's going on within the story, and what I kind of talked about briefly in my previous episode review, is that with every loop, we get a different side or perspective of characters. For instance, Garfield. It's a good example of this arc. Garfield's had many different layers to him added, thanks to everything going on in this arc. And Rosewall makes a good point. He's like, Subaru, you may be able to reset. You may be able to redo things, and fix everything, and make everybody survive, whatever. But you see, this is my end. I don't get another chance. And it makes you really think about it, the philosophy of it, because technically, when Subaru does restart over, the Rosewall that he meets won't technically be the same Rosewall. It's kind of like the whole situation in Season 1 with Rim. When you think about what happened with Rim, and how she was the one to actually kill Subaru at the beginning of Season 1, she's obviously not the same person as she was towards the end of Season 1. And obviously there's different versions of said characters, and that's the point here, is that Rosewall's like, I may be evil in this loop, I may be an obstacle for you, but it doesn't mean maybe the next loop I might be an obstacle. This is my dead end for this Rosewall, but the other Rosewall you meet will be someone else entirely. And it shows that Rosewall is definitely not mentally sane by any means. He's willing to put absolute faith that Subaru will definitely redo everything and correct it, and even throw his life away because he can realize that his other him, another Rosewall, will probably be able to fulfill his goal. He just knows it's the dead end for himself. So this kind of explains Rosewall's psyche as well in the previous loops, and why he constantly seemed very detached, or why he didn't have any emotions in his face, is because he realized that most likely this was the end of him. This is the end of this Rosewall, and so he's like, okay, this is my end, I gotta leave it up to another Rosewall. So that's a very big detail too, is that Rosewall has shown this side of him constantly, that he's just willing to give up. He's just like, okay, it's over. This is done. I need to wait for another Rosewall to be able to, complete what I need completed. So one last thing I would like to add on before I wrap up this video is that we get to see a major contrast between Rosewall and Subaru and how they actually experience death. When we saw, Subaru's death to the Great Rabbit a few episodes back, we saw that he screamed. He was in, excruciating pain. This is a man that's died multiple times, but even then, he screamed out against the Great Rabbit, and he was horrified. He even got to see Ekidana because of just how much pain he went through. But you see, Rosewall, he just willingly accepts death. He just walks into death like nothing. He's like, here, just take me, and this is my dead end. And it's just like, he knows it's his dead end, too. That's the big thing. It's completely different from Subaru, because Subaru knows he can come back. But Rosewall, he knows technically he's done. His Rosewall is done. So it just really shows the contrast of how Rosewall views death, his mental state, and how he just he's so detached. He's even further detached from life and death than even Subaru is. So yeah, it's an incredibly powerful episode, honestly, to really give so many details to characters and stuff, and I gotta say that, man, this was a fantastic episode with the Great Rabbit popping up and seeing Rosewall just accept death like that. It shows what type of mental state he's in as well, just to be able to allow himself to die like that. And on top of that, you just see how Amelia is at the end, how she just, treats Subaru and doesn't even acknowledge his wounds. There's just so much to really take from this episode. It's fantastic. This is a really good episode of ReZero. Easily one of the nuttiest and best episodes of the series, in my personal opinion. But I think I want to leave it at that. I love you guys. You have a wonderful day or night wherever you live. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like. And with that, Chibi out.